If you were a console Harry Potter fan in 2004, this is the moment that would make you literally lose your mind.
Harry!
Holy shit, you can play as Ron now too! And Hermione!
Yeah!
And all that in a large, explorable Hogwarts. Well, explorable when the game doesn't arbitrarily lock floors. But let's start from the beginning. Unlike previous titles, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban did not have 5 game adaptations made for it, but only 3. Today we're taking a look at the version for PlayStation 2, Xbox and Gamecube developed by EA UK. Since this is a continuation of the console Chamber of Secrets and Philosopher Stone games in terms of overall direction, I would strongly suggest watching reviews of those games if you haven't. To save time, they will be referenced quite a bit. Links are in the description and YouTube cards. This time, there aren't any really considerable differences between the 3 platforms outside of some graphical ones. Okay, well, the PlayStation 2 version has some iToy minigames accessible from the main menu, and that's a big difference, but the core game is the same in every version, likewise with performance. So let's get straight to it. As always, we'll dissect Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban with the help of my Stasocritic scoring system, starting with the design category. This is the most important part of Stasocritic. Games are defined by how they're built and played, so this section has the biggest weight for scores, 4. The overall structure of Prisoner of Azkaban is the same as in the previous console outings. The game is divided into different day and night segments, where during the day you have class lessons, while at night you regularly sneak out of your dormitory for one reason or another. What makes it play quite differently this time is the fact that you can switch at will between all 3 of the main characters: Harry, Hermione and Ron. Each has their own special abilities. Harry is the only one who can jump across gaps and view the Marauder's map. Ron can find hidden doors, and for some reason only he can search shelves for resources, though I suppose that fits with the Discovering Secrets theme, and Hermione can go through tight gaps and learn the largest amount of spells. And speaking of spells, only Flipendo and Expelliarmus is something that all 3 can use. Every other spell is unique to each character. You can see how this can be used as a setup for very cool sequences, both linear and explorative, and Prisoner of Azkaban often succeeds very well. This is best seen in the spell challenge dungeons, which thanks to character switching mechanics and more elaborate map design, are the best incarnations of these levels in the console Harry Potter tie-ins. Let's take a look at the Glacier spell challenge, for example. It's the first dungeon in the game, so we have access only to the basic spell toolkit. After using all characters to take a huge cauldron-like thing onto a pressure plate to open the door, you get to what is essentially the central chamber of the dungeon. At first, you need to use Harry and his jumping abilities to solve the mirror light puzzle and open the way further. A couple smaller chambers after, you need to switch to Ron to find a hidden entrance which separates you from the rest of the characters. You then make your way back to the central room, where you open up a path that only Hermione can go through. Now as Hermione, you need to solve some ice block puzzles, and then you reach the Glacius spellbook. After learning the spell, ice melts and the floor is filled with lava. Don't worry everyone, Hogwarts is the safest school in the world. Now everything is recontextualized and you need to use Glacius to create ice surfaces and start making your way back. There's also a recontextualization of the ice cube puzzle here as well. Not only do you need to make an ice cube yourself with a spell you've learned, but also since the areas aren't filled with ice anymore, you have to push it out of what would otherwise be its puzzle area limits. And then you get back to the central chamber where everything has also been fully melted and fire salamanders just roam about. Naturally, you need to use Glacius to be able to beat them with Flipendo after. And then at the end of it all, when you're on your way back, the cauldron-like thing you all had to drag at the beginning transforms into this dungeon's boss that, following all traditions, has to be defeated with a newly found Glacius spell. It's very cool. The spell challenge has everything it needs. Recontextualization of environments, working both alone and as a team, utilization of every character's ability, and of your full spell arsenal, even though at this point in particular it's not big. But these principles are further expanded upon in the following levels, which are very good. And like in the previous games, you learn new spells not only during lessons, but also on your nightly outings, and those missions use the same principles. You'll go through a Muggle museum full of toys, a chamber where you need to go up by repairing or otherwise connecting together a round staircase while exploring the surrounding areas, and of course, classic dungeon environments. Bosses this time around are not reused, and each has a particular strategy required to defeat them, so that part is more varied than in the previous games. Secrets are also much more interesting than just opening a particular chest with a particular spell, as often you need to complete little puzzles to get to those chests in the first place. Nothing too complex, but it helps with exploration. There are some very cute examples too, like you can find a wizard card by using glaciers on a fireplace in the Gryffindor common room. Even stealth sections are actually fine. A big reason for that is that most of the time you need to avoid static statues that have a very clearly defined line of sight. But also, whenever you have to avoid prefects, you don't have to worry about sound or anything like that, just that you're not in front of their eyes. This greatly streamlines the activity, making it something that indeed adds variety, rather than being an obnoxious section you have to trudge through. So as a whole, out of the 3 console Harry Potter games that follow this direction, Prisoner of Azkaban has the best levels and exploration elements. And like in Philosopher's Stone, Snape will require potion ingredients as part of his homework, and those you need to find on the Hogwarts grounds, also in ways that are not necessarily complex, but engaging nonetheless. Now, this is where the unequivocally great parts of the Prisoner of Azkaban sadly end, and we get into the game's more questionable aspects. You see, it's clear that this game had a lot of ambition. It uses what looks like an updated version of the Chamber of Secrets engine, with tons of new models, environments, and animations alongside a pretty big amount of new mechanics. But a lot of these parts don't quite work well enough, even as integral to gameplay as basic movement. Not only there's a bit of an input delay, but also characters when running full speed don't seem to turn around instantly, rather choosing to sort of try to move in smoother curves. This leads to situations where getting into the necessary position to push an object or pick something up can be needlessly complicated. Spell targeting is also disappointing. Automatic targeting works poorly, and lock-on this time is fairly inconsistent as well. There are pretty frequent situations where you're put in group-on-group spell fights, both in the main story and also as part of a dueling club side activity. In all these cases, the way spell targeting works transforms the whole ordeal into a chaotic mess. At some point during exploration, I even stopped trying to hit random objects with Flipendo for the purposes of getting beans, just because you have to be extremely precise for that to happen. AI also doesn't seem to detect if you're in their way when they cast a spell or not. So for example, you can be using Lumos on a Hinkipunk, so they will take physical form for others to fire Flipendo at it, but they will hit you instead.
I didn't mean it!
At least they apologize after. So you have to be very careful in your positioning if you want allies to be of any practical use. Then, the way the game handles exploration progression is weird. To put it simply, very often a number of floors will be arbitrarily locked. I actually couldn't visit Fred and George's shop on the 6th floor for quite a while, because every time I would try to go there, the floor was locked. And there are some situations where you can actually go around these locks by using shortcuts, like for example you can get to the 4th floor even when it's locked out by using a shortcut from the 7th one, but not every floor has a shortcut leading towards them. And it's a shame because exploration is really the only meaningful side activity you can do. There's some notice board quests like in previous titles, and in addition to the dueling club you can also have owl races and fly on the hippogriff, but that's not really enough, plus neither is great from a mechanical standpoint. Quidditch is not playable in this game either, so there's no tournament related to it, and the House Cup once again is just for points gathering. I don't think you can lose it. Though I couldn't confirm that particular part, I can say that by the end of the game it seems to be impossible to have less points than Slytherin. There is also a matter of the game's missions sort of getting lower in quality in the late game. Hogsmeade is just a small area with a shack in the middle, The whole jinxed Quidditch ball switcheroo situation is resolved in a couple of minutes. The underground path towards the Shrieking Shack, which is ostensibly the final dungeon of the game, is but a collection of linear tunnels where a bunch of enemies are thrown at you, not nearly as interesting or elaborate as the early missions you encounter. And that's, if anything, a clear sign of developers not having enough time to flesh all that content out. I would even say not enough time to flesh out all the mechanical quirks too. For example, doxies poison your characters, but their attacks are often near impossible to dodge. Red caps are sort of annoying because some of them have shields which you need to use Carpe Retractum on, but they're sent in big groups and encounters with them transform into chaos, akin to dueling with students. And then there is a very big annoyance when it comes to button mapping. Switching characters is done through a face button, which means that instead of 3 spells like in previous games, you can only have 2 spells equipped at a time. And considering that Flipendo is something that you pretty much need equipped permanently, prepare to go into the spell switching menu a lot, especially as Hermione. Like many licensed titles, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is a very interesting project that clearly just needed a bit more time to get properly fleshed out and polished. But, like most licensed titles, it didn't have that time. If only one could make use of a time turner for the development of this game, right? If we open up all the possible scores for design, feel free to pause if you'd like to read them all, I will assign a 7. It would have been an 8 had it not been for all the core gameplay movement and spell targeting issues that, while not breaking the experience, do add quite a lot of frustration. But otherwise, even though it sort of peters out at the end, Prisoner of Azkaban has many examples of strong level and world design, which make it enjoyable to play throughout. Now let's move on to context. This category has a weight of 1 as it's about things that enhance the experience rather than define it. Plot, motivation, character arcs, etc. Even though Prisoner of Azkaban is an adaptation, we'll cover how well it handles this category without assuming knowledge of the source material, with the exception of previous books or movies, as this is a sequel after all. The first thing that we'd like to talk about is the weird structure of the plot. I guess this was inevitable in a way. Prisoner of Azkaban doesn't have a crystal clear mystery story structure like Chamber of Secrets did, so the day-night nature of the game doesn't lend itself too well to that. That being said, there are still a number of weird choices about what to focus on during nighttime missions. One of the first things you do in the game is getting the Marauders map, which is actually a very good choice. But then between lessons you're sort of doing weird things. There's a lot of focus on Draco and his mischiefs. One night you need to save Neville from the ghoul that was set upon him by Draco and his thugs. Then there's another night where Draco used the Apologies potion to disguise himself as Ron to get you into a trap. While instead of those, there could be moments inspired by the original story, like for example trying to find Peter Pettigrew, of whose existence, by the way, we don't know until the very end of the game, where it's explained that Peter is the one who actually betrayed Harry's father, not Sirius. And it's weird because there's a pretty big focus on Scabbers trying to run away, which is a clear setup for Peter being afraid of Sirius hunting for him. Speaking of Sirius, the whole premise of the story is that everybody mistakenly thinks that he wants to kill Harry. Only in the game, nobody tells Harry that. It's just that when we get to Hogwarts, the narrator mentions that Harry is worried that Sirius is likely looking for him. In the end, thanks to the same narrator filling in the blanks, all important for understanding the story points are at the very least mentioned throughout the game, so you get what's it about. But it lacks proper flow and drama. It's all very informational, and the character writing is not as good as it was in the Chamber of Secrets game, so a big part of narrative enjoyment is lost. All in all, should we open up all the scores for context, I will assign a 5. The story, overall, is understandable, but the game doesn't adapt the source material's narrative to game format as well as Chamber of Secrets did, the writing is bland, and there are a lot of moments that are quite unnecessary in the current context, and it would have been better had they been replaced with something more relevant to the main plot. It'll make it more enjoyable. Let's discuss aesthetics. This is another category with a weight of 1, as it's again about something that enhances the experience rather than defines it, this time through visual style, music, sounds, etc. It's clear that a lot of care went into making the surrounding environments beautiful. Every room has a lot of details and the Hogwarts grounds are fantastic. I absolutely love how seasons change as we progress. Rainy autumn, winter full of snow, and sunny blooming spring. There are some little details like shortcut rooms having a bunch of webbing inside and an object stored there because, well, they're secret. Nobody visits them. That attention to detail is really cool. And there was a lot of effort in making sure that our main trio is full of life. The animations are fantastic. I particularly love this one of Hermione fixing her hair after she wakes up. There's just something so Hermione about it, if that makes sense. Sadly though, all the other characters didn't have enough time to get that same amount of attention. Hagrid looks weird, as does Snape, and Lupin, their voice acting isn't particularly great either. And the cutscenes are widely inconsistent in their cinematography. Some are very well done, but in others people just stand around motionlessly. Also, despite how much attention there is to the castle environments, the scale often feels off. The ceiling on pretty much every floor is exceptionally high, and you clearly don't traverse that big of a height on staircases. I suppose it's not something that important in the grand scheme of things, plus you always can justify this through magic or something. But in the end, should we take a look at all scores for aesthetics, I will assign an 8. The foundation is strong, but like with other aspects of the game, there clearly wasn't enough time to flesh everything out. Now it's time for Cohesion. This category has a weight of 2 as it's about how well the game connects all of its aspects together into a singular cohesive whole. I'm not going to spend much time here today, as overall the way experience is connected is as solid as it was in the Chamber of Secrets. And what Prisoner of Azkaban lacks in some aspects, like the absence of a proper house or Quidditch Cup, which have really enhanced the Chamber of Secrets as an experience, it balances out with a lot of really neat little gameplay differences between characters. For example, just like in the books, Hermione can enter the boys' dormitory, but boys can't enter the girls' dormitory. Or how Hippogriff accepts Harry and Hermione, but not Ron. But even if you're Harry or Hermione, you better not try to approach Buckbeak from behind. Again, wonderful overall attention to detail. So in the end, just like with Chamber of Secrets, I will assign an 8 to Prisoner of Azkaban. It's a very solid representation of a Harry Potter experience. Time for our final category, emotions. This is the most subjective category of Stasocritic because it is all about personal feelings. But also, since personal feelings matter a lot, this section has the second biggest weight, 3. Even if a game is flawed, it can be enjoyed greatly. And that's precisely the case with this version of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I've mentioned this in my review of the PC version, but Prisoner of Azkaban is my favorite Harry Potter movie, so naturally its game tie-ins are those I'm interested in the most. On one hand, I'm pretty sad that Prisoner of Azkaban doesn't reach its full potential. With the way everything is set up here, so many more things could have been possible with a little bit more time and polish. But on the other hand, it's also not an experience I can call lacking. Without a doubt, I enjoyed this title the most out of the first 3 Harry Potter games for this generation of consoles. This is why, should we take a look at the scores, I will assign a 9. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is just an all-around great time. Let's summarize everything. After all scores and their weights are taken into account, this version of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban gets a final Stasocritic rating of 74. it's a pretty good game. In my Chamber of Secrets video, I have mentioned how that title is a forgotten classic. Well, Prisoner of Azkaban turns out to be an even more forgotten classic, as I have heard people talking about it even less than I heard people discussing the Chamber of Secrets game. But it's really solid and you should definitely check it out if you're interested in this genre. The levels are really good, the exploration is fun when you can do it, of course. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is a sad case of a game getting less attention because it's not as novel. It builds upon already established foundations, which is also why this video is much shorter than the one about Chamber of Secrets, but it definitely is a good experience that you won't regret playing.